With AdonisJS, there's two different ways that we can actually communicate with our database. You have the database module, and then you have models. Now, models serve as the recommended interface to actually communicate with your database, and then falling back to the database module anytime that models can't fill the void that you're looking for. Now, models follow the active record pattern, meaning that they're going to serve as encapsulations for the database interactions that we'll be doing, and they'll provide back objects or classes that are type safe for us. So a model is going to serve as a representation of an actual database table. So for the most part, we're going to want one model per table within our database, with the exception of those many-to-many pivot tables. In the long run, by utilizing these models, we're actually going to save ourselves a ton of code. So if we actually take a look here, AdonisJS has an example on their documentation here. So here's an example of what a query looks like without models. So you query it from the database using the database module, and then you represent what table you want to pick from, selecting the columns. And then you get back all of those users. Then anytime that you query those users for display, you're going to need to loop over them to convert any database values to display safe values. So in this example here, they're looping over the users, getting a single user within this callback here. And then they're converting that user's date of birth using lux and date time. They're ingesting that date of birth and then changing its format. With models, this is vastly simplified, and we only need to perform this conversion once, and AdonisJS will recognize we want to do that every single time. So if we actually take a look at their example here, we have a user model, which is represented by a class. It extends a base model. And this column decorator represents the actual property that it's decorating, is a valid column within our database table. Off of the column decorator, we're chaining off a date method. This date method actually instructs Lucid to actually take that value, convert it from that date or datetime string from the database, and convert it into a lux and datetime object for us automatically. No additional checks needed on our part. Now within this date method, we're actually providing an option to serialize. This serialize method will run anytime that our user model is actually serialized. So really anytime that we're passing it from Adonis to outside the Adonis ecosystem. This could be returning it as an API response, or it could be returning it from Edge to our front-end code base. And down here, they do have an example of how to actually go about serializing this manually as well. But this method will run anytime that that happens. And within this method, we're provided the value for the column, and we can actually take that value and convert it using any lux and datetime method that we might want to choose. In this case, they're using toFormat to change the format value as they were showing in the previous example. So here's a look at the two side by side. The model one will run every single time that we query using our model. This top one will need to execute any time that we query our users on our own. So that's one awesome level of abstraction that Lucid provides for us that we don't need to worry about. We set it once and then we can forget about it. Now, whenever it comes time to actually creating our models, the ACLI comes in very handy. You can see here we can use the make model command to easily create a model by just providing in the name. So in this case, user. And that will create the model for us within app models, and it will call it user.ts. As with everything else in Adonis, there is naming normalization going on here. Since models generally represent a single record for a table, they're going to be singularized. So if you were to provide users as the name, AdonisJS will normalize that to user automatically for you. But in addition to just creating the model, you can also pass in additional flags to create other things for the model automatically. So you can see here we can provide in -m to create a migration automatically at the same time that we're creating the model. There's a -f to do the exact same for a factory. Factories are used so that we can easily create loads of test data for the model out of the get-go. That's provided an instance of faker within there so that you can fill those up with a bunch of fake data. There's also a -c, which isn't in this documentation set here, but that will create a controller for the model as well. And you can mix and match those in any set that you might need. So you can do -mc to create a migration and a controller. You can do -mf to create a migration and a factory. You can do -mfc to create a migration, factory, and controller all at the same time. In addition to the things that we've just talked about, models can also do loads of other things for us, including allowing us to define query scopes, allowing us to extend our own methods off of it so that we can easily reach for stuff. That can be both class and instance level methods, so we can either perform it in a broad sense by doing it as a class method, or we can perform it on instance method to do it for a single record within our database. And then as we saw a moment ago with the serialize method here, there's also other methods that you can do off of this. There's consume, so that you can change how it's actually consumed straight out of the database. There's prepare, so that you can change how it goes into the database. Then there are hooks that'll actually allow you to chain in particular events that are happening on a model. Query scopes, which come in handy with the query builder, which allow you to just pack a level of different query statements into one specific method. There's the query builder as a whole, which is the same as the database query builder, but there's also a lot of other methods available on the model query builder that aren't available on the database query builder, like preloading relationships that allow us to take our querying just a step further so that we don't need to actually join everything anytime that we want a relationship. And in order to do that, we also need to define our relationships on the model as well, which just provides a universe of different functionalities for us. So we're going to be spending the next several lessons focusing specifically on models and all of these things that we've just talked about, taking a look at them one by one. And we're also going to step through the different CRUD actions as well. But we've spent a lot of time here looking at the documentation. What we need to do now is actually create our models within our project. So if we jump back into our project here, we have our two migrations, our roles and users migrations. Now at this time, there's no automated process to take this migration definition and just convert it into a model. It's a manual process at present, but it's actually relatively easy if we utilize some Visual Studio Code options at our disposal. And one really cool thing to have installed within Visual Studio Code is the AdonisJS extensions pack. This provides you not only a number of different things off to the toolbar that I have hidden off on the left-hand side here, or you might have it off to the right-hand side, like being able to visualize your routes and a number of other things. But if we hold Command or Control-Shift-P, you'll see that we also have all of the ACE commands available at our disposal here, one of which is this make model. So we can go ahead and click on that, provide in the model name. So let's do role first. So we can provide in role, hit enter there. Then it'll step through those flag options for us. So it will ask us first if we want to generate out a migration for this model. We already have one here, so I'm going to hit no. Then it will ask us about a controller. We don't need one for roles, so we'll hit no on that as well. Then it will ask us about a factory. We've already generated out our roles within that migration file using this defer, so we can go ahead and hit no on that as well. Now conversely, if you don't want to use that, you can also jump into your terminal, go into your project, and write out the command manually. So you can do node ace make model and call that role. If you execute that, it'll skip over it since I've just created it, but if you don't have it created, then it will go ahead and make it for you. So you'll see a couple of things here. First, we have that column decorator that we saw previously on the documentation. This represents that the ID created at and updated at are valid columns within our database, which if we were to take a look right here, jump into our roles, you can see we do indeed have an ID created at and updated at, but we also have a name and description that we need to add in here as well. So what we can do is define these as columns. So we can add in that column decorator, define it as a public property, define the actual column name, and then define its type within a TypeScript safe type. So it's not going to be one-to-one with the actual type that's in the database, but it's going to be close, and it's going to be a TypeScript representation that you use. So as you can see, our ID is going to be an integer within the database, but within our model, it's a number. And then in addition to name, we also have an at column public for our description. This too is a string. And there we go. We have our first model up and running and ready to go already. Now there's a few things that we haven't discussed here yet that are going on within this particular model. So first, within column, we're providing in an is primary true as an argument to the decorator. As you might have guessed, this does actually represent that this is a primary key within the actual database. So whether you're using an ID, a UUID, you would want that to be marked as is primary within your model to represent that that is your primary key. Then down here, just like within the documentation example we saw, we're chaining off of our column here an additional method called datetime. As we previously discussed, this will actually take the datetime out of the database and then convert it into a Luxon datetime within our model. So if we were to query our role using our model, then we would actually have the Luxon datetime value available to us. So with the datetime method here, we're providing an auto create true, and then for updated at, we're providing additional auto update true there as well. So what this will do is whenever we actually create a record using our model, it will auto create this created at and updated at value based off of the current time. Auto update will do the same thing, but for updating a record. So if you change a record's value, so if you change the name, updated at will automatically update to the current date and time. Now there's loads of different options for these particular arguments and everything. So the best place to find that is within the documentation. If you go underneath references here for database, down here in the ORM section, there is a decorator section here. So you can see all of the different decorators. A lot of these listed are going to be for relationships, which we'll get into at a later point in time. But you also see you have this column one here along with the column date and date time. And this is where you can find all of the argument sets that the column and date time decorators accept. So you can see right down here in the option set, we have that column name, serialized as is primary, serialized, prepare, consume, meta, and that looks to be the end of it. Of this list, the most important one to note, I think, is the column name. So if we take a look at our actual database, you'll notice that the created at and updated at are snake cased, meaning that they have underscores separating the two different words that they would be if they were in English. If we take a look at the model that was generated for us, they're in camel case. So we have created at with a capital A, and then we have updated at with a capital A. That's the default naming convention with Adonis. So it expects snake case in the database and then camel case within your models. And this is just a developer experience thing, so that you don't have to use snake case everywhere within your code base. You can use camel case, which is a more normalized developer naming structure there. But say you didn't want to use that within your model. Say for whatever reason you wanted to use snake case or something else for a particular column. You can provide that in as the column name, and we could provide that in as created at, and then we can provide whatever we wanted here for the actual model representation. So we could do this is created at again, whatever you wanted to. Essentially, this column name is just going to map whatever name we provide here to the actual database column created_at. This is created at, doesn't make any sense, so I'm going to set that back to created at. But do know that column name there does exist if you have any one-offs where you need to name something abstract as its representation from the database. All right, so that's our role model. Next, let's go ahead and create our user model. And for this one, let's go ahead and use the terminal so that we show both fashions here. So let's do node ace make model user. And let's also go ahead and create a controller for this, so we can do -c. All right, so it looks like for some reason it failed to finish out the command here, but we do indeed have our user's controller and our user model created successfully. So I'm gonna go ahead and just ignore that error for what it is. And let's go ahead and dive into our user model. And you can see we have the same thing that we started out with our role model. So we have an ID, we've set the primary, we have created at and updated at, set the auto create, and then updated at for auto update. Now what we need to do is convert all of our user columns into our columns in our models. And then what I like to do for this is just to go ahead and copy all of the different columns that you need to actually convert into your model columns. Go ahead and copy those, jump into your model, go to where those need to be added, paste them in as the migration statements that they are, and then we can use multi-line commands here to alter this in one blow. So holding down Option Command or Option Control on Windows, hit the down arrow until you have all of the different rows that you just pasted in selected. Hold down Shift, Option, and then you can hit the arrow key right to highlight a whole set of words. So you can highlight table, let go of Option, hit right once more to get that single dot character. Go ahead and cut that out. Shift Option arrow right again to copy the actual type for the column. Now I'm going to cut this out. So I'm going to do Command or Control X. And then I'm just going to go over highlighting 2 more characters, delete those out, highlight the word set. And now I have a convert to camel case command installed on Visual Studio Code. So I can do Command or Control Shift P and type in camel case. And then I can select this change camel case. So now those are automatically changed to camel case for me. I'm gonna hit right on the arrow key to go beyond those column names. And then what I do at this point is note which columns are nullable. So it looks like they're all not nullable. We do want to change our role to be not nullable, but we'll go ahead and hold down Command or Control Shift and then hit right on the arrow key to highlight the remainder of that string. And then we can hit delete on that to get rid of it. Command and then hit left to jump back to the start of all of our strings. Type at column and that, hit enter. Type public, command right to go to the end of the word, type colon, and then paste in those types that we copied earlier, and then hit enter to put a line break in between all of those. Now we can jump down to the end here, get rid of that spare line break, and then all that we need to do is go through and convert the types from database types to TypeScript types. And for our case here, it's just this integer needs to change to number. And there we have it. There's our user and role models set up, configured, and ready for us to continue onward. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. If you did, please consider hitting the like button down below and subscribing for future lessons just like this one. We're going to be continuing this series, going into depth on our models here. So if you'd like to learn more, please stick around. I'll see you all in the next one.